Different people look for different things in any movie, and it's thanks to this that there can be some wildly contradicting views on exactly the same thing. They say the world would be a pretty boring place if everyone always agreed, and that's definitely true when it comes to the big screen. For example, what a critic wants and expects from a picture is likely to be of a higher quality from a technical standpoint, whereas general audiences may be easier to please. Whether they're a fan of a particular franchise or just looking to escape to a different world for a couple of hours, they may not have the same requirements for enjoying something as a professional critic might. Though it is far from perfect, Rotten Tomatoes is a strong way of gauging how a film has performed with each party. There's a score produced based on the percentage of critics who offered favorable reviews, the tomato meter, and the same for the audience, the popcorn meter. Here, it is easy to see that while critics may hate something, it doesn't necessarily reflect the overall opinions of the mainstream audience, and vice versa. Art is, after all, subjective, and just because someone else may dislike something, it doesn't mean that you will. So I am Gareth, you're watching What Culture, and let's have a look right now at 10 movies critics and audiences couldn't agree on. Number 10, Red One. It's always important to go into any movie with some sort of reasonable expectations. If you want to be scared, don't go to a kids' film. And if you want heartwarming joy, then don't go to a horror film, and so forth. You'll just be disappointed, or traumatized in the latter case. Similarly, don't go into a movie with Dwayne Johnson front and center and expect anything other than a fun action adventure that doesn't go too deep or keep you on your toes. Look, the man specializes in popcorn action, and he does it well. Red One is no different, folks. Opposite Chris Evans, the action-packed buddy comedy adventure to save Christmas is little more than what you'd expect. But it's done well, because like I said, Rocky just does this stuff well. According to the 90% popcorn meter score, audiences definitely resonated with it. However, it left a lot to be desired for critics who potentially expected a little bit more from such a big-budget Christmas blockbuster. Red One is similar to Red Notice and plenty of other Dwayne Johnson efforts without the word red in the title. The wrestling legend isn't going to wow you with a nuanced performance in a film that will make you think. Well, he hasn't yet anyway. But audiences who know what to expect typically enjoy a fun 2-hour romp. Number 9, Uncharted. Adapting video games onto the big screen has always proven difficult. And though there have been improvements over recent years, the bar is still set very low. So much so, there is almost a preconception that such adaptations will invariably be bad. So, a project like Uncharted already had a mountain to climb when you consider having to do justice to such a popular franchise, as well as the lengthy spell it spent in development hell. And unsurprisingly, critics didn't take too kindly to Ruben Fleischer's effort, as it earned just 42% on the tomato meter. Not great. The popcorn meter told a very different story though, even in spite of the issues I just mentioned. Yeah, 89% is a quite insane score to receive, as audiences clearly enjoyed Uncharted for the globe-trotting adventure that it was. A few shirtless scenes with Tom Holland obviously don't hurt either. In reality, the Spider-Man actor was far from what many expected from the man chosen to portray Nathan Drake, and the same could be said about Mark Wahlberg as Sully, while Elena Fisher was absent from the film altogether. However, enough elements from the games remain to give cinemagoers a good time. Stuff like the beautiful backdrops, the quips, and the outrageous sequences like Drake hanging from a plane, or fighting on an ancient pirate ship being flown by a helicopter, all in a day's work. Because we are talking about films that audiences and critics cannot agree on, I want to know right now, what's a film that you love that everyone else hates? Let me know in the comments down below. Number 8, Venom. If recent reports are to be believed, Sony's Spider-Man universe is officially dying with yet another box office flop. This time in the form of Kraven the Hunter. Who saw that coming? That Aaron Taylor Johnson-led outing is simply the latest chapter in a franchise that struggled from the start. Venom released back in 2018, arguably before the setting of the perceived superhero fatigue, and was actually incredibly successful at the box office. The film pulled in an impressive $856 million, more than enough to greenlight a sequel despite the poor critical reception. At just 30% on the tomato meter, Sony's first foray into its own Marvel universe simply could not keep up with the MCU movies of the time. However, Tom Hardy carried Venom to a much more pleasing 80% score with audiences. Now, it's hard to say just how much impact Hardy had on the entire Venom trilogy, but it's even harder to imagine anyone else even coming close to how he portrayed the balmy role. Playing both Eddie Brock and Venom, the chemistry and bromance between the two made not just Venom, but both sequels enjoyable for many who paid to see them, even if critically there wasn't much more to them than that. People wanted to see Tom Hardy bicker with himself, and that is what they got. Number 7, the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Here we are, back with another video game adaptation, and arguably one even tougher to get right than Uncharted, simply because it is one of the most famous gaming franchises of all time. You've only got to look at 1993 Super Mario Bros. Picture to see just how wrong this could have gone. However, after pulling in an insane $1.3 billion globally, it is fair to say that 2023's The Super Mario Bros. Movie was a success, and it's interesting to look at how both critics and audiences viewed it. The film's 59% tomato meter score certainly isn't as bad as some of the entries on this list, but it does fall below the fresh threshold on Rotten Tomatoes. One criticism that seems almost universal is that the movie was designed to reach and please as wide an audience as possible, without worrying too much about telling a compelling story or taking any risks. It was quite safe. But it would seem, based on the box office figures and the staggering 95% popcorn meter score, that this strategy worked. Nintendo gave mainstream audiences exactly what they wanted from a Super Mario movie, even if the narrative was relatively weak and the script was nothing to write home about. Folks still let out a big ol' wahoo! Number 6, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Godzilla sort of became Legendary Pictures' version of Tony Stark in 2014, kicking off the Monsterverse. Although the big shared universe reveal didn't actually come until 3 years later with Kong's Skull Island. Since then, the legendary monster has made 3 further big screen appearances in the wider shared franchise. In 2 of these, Godzilla has shared the spotlight with Kong, but in 2019 came his solo sequel, King of the Monsters. Though it was widely panned by critics who cited a poor script and bland human characters as major issues, audiences seem to love it all the same. When going into a Godzilla movie such as this, you have to know what you're gonna get. If you want giant monsters fighting each other and flattening buildings, then you'll likely love it, as this is what it is designed to be. But don't go in expecting anything more than this kind of fan service, folks. The same could be said about Godzilla x Kong: The New Empire, which had a similar critic-audience split. No one is trying to claim Godzilla King of the Monsters is on the same level as Godzilla -1 because, well, it's not even close. But it was still a fun chapter in the story about gargantuan beasts beating each other up, I guess. If you are enjoying this video, my friend, then hit that subscribe button down below and you will get more of these What Culture videos each and every day. How good is that? That is something we can all agree on. Number 5, Amsterdam. Snagging a big name or two for a film can do magic when it comes to getting audiences to watch it. And aside from the obvious marketing advantages, many of these names also tend to simply make better anything that they're in. But it is not always quite as straightforward as this. Yes, a strong cast can help, but it doesn't always guarantee success, either critically or commercially. Take Amsterdam, a picture that famously flopped when it released in 2022, regardless of a ridiculously stacked billing of Christian Bale, Margot Robbie, John David Washington, Anya Taylor-Joy, Chris Rock, Michael Shannon, Mike Myers, Zoe Saldana, Rami Malek, and even Robert De Niro. Stars everywhere you look. Audiences seem to be swayed by the names and talent on show, and it does seem that this kind of cast would almost automatically score some points. However, critically speaking, there is far more to a film than its actors. Though the likes of Bale and Robbie in particular made Amsterdam far better than it could have been otherwise, they were unable to mask the confusing and convoluted story being told in a film that couldn't seem to settle on one tone to take. Number 4, Mulan. Everyone knows the score by now. Disney is putting a lot of time and resources into bringing their classic animated movies into live action. The likes of Cinderella and The Jungle Book were well received by critics and audiences alike back in 2015 and 2016 respectively. But this has changed a bit over the years. As more and more remakes have been produced, the appeal has dropped dramatically. Though there are still a handful, Aladdin, The Lion King, and The Little Mermaid in particular, that have been enjoyed by audiences far more than critics. Mulan, however, has shifted the other way. While most of these remakes exist to exploit nostalgia with little more than shot-for-shot remakes, Mulan was different. Important characters were reimagined, or in Mushu's case, removed altogether, as director Nicky Caro brought to screen a darker, more mature story, even going so far as to cut out the songs completely. Unsurprisingly, this didn't really sit well with those looking to relive the film from the late 1990s, but critics largely felt that it made for a better picture, with a strong, if not perfect, 72% tomato meter score. For anyone who does want to relive the 1998 version of Mulan, maybe just watch the 1998 version of Mulan. Just a thought. Number 3, The Grey Man. The film industry is so ridiculously saturated that it can be tough to stand out from the crowd. A movie has to offer something unique so as not to be labeled just another horror film or just another comic book movie. And it is no different for the action genre. On paper, you couldn't dream of putting together a better or more exciting leading line for such a flick as Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, and Ana de Armas. That's some talent right there. And with the Russo brothers directing on a reported $200 million budget for Netflix, The Grey Man had huge potential. However, what was produced could easily be described as just another action movie. A rather forgettable piece that lacked anything particularly original or groundbreaking. Not too dissimilar to the typical Dwayne Johnson outings discussed earlier in this very video. That said, for audiences, just another action film was enough. The 90% popcorn meter score suggests that they didn't need the Russos to reinvent the wheel here, but to get Gosling, Evans, and de Armas together to produce some fun Friday night entertainment. And that's what they got. Arguably, you could feel that the $200 million Netflix shelled out could have gone a bit further, but do casual audiences really care about all that when a picture starts? Not really. Number 2, Jigsaw. Like with most iconic horror franchise, see the likes of Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street, there are more bad Saw movies than there are good. That has never stopped Lionsgate Films from trying to buck the trend, however. You'd have been forgiven for expecting Saw the final chapter to be, well, the final chapter in the Saw story. But 7 years later came Jigsaw. Critics were not impressed with the outing, as it brought little new or revolutionary to the game, and was nothing that hadn't been seen before. But audiences, and Saw fans in particular, were able to take more from it. Perhaps it's because there had been a 7-year break after one Saw film per year between 2004 and 2010, and that the last outing was the final chapter, a film that even the most devout horror fan couldn't defend. But Jigsaw was seen by many as a return to form. Jigsaw's 88% popcorn meter score is tied highest in the franchise with the most recent chapter in the story, Saw X, and is even higher than the original. Certainly far from perfect, but still one of the best that Saw has ever produced. And number 1, Warcraft. Right from the off, Warcraft was an incredibly divisive movie, and almost impressively on multiple different levels. Critics gave it a meager 29% score on Rotten Tomatoes, while audiences were a huge 47% gap away with 76%. There aren't too many that can match that kind of chasm. The first argument here is style over substance. Even the most ardent haters would have to admit that Warcraft was aesthetically beautiful. But how much was there underneath it all? Visuals tend to go a lot further with casual viewers than with critics, which goes a long way towards explaining the aforementioned gap. People like to look at nice things, okay? However, that's not the only point of contention, and again, we're returning to the problem of adapting a gaming franchise. There is always the risk that such a film will struggle to reach mainstream audiences, instead catering too much toward the pre-established fanbase. This was most assuredly an issue for many critics, and even certain fans have been able to admit that this is a film for World of Warcraft lovers only. The high popcorn meter score seems to suggest that Warcraft succeeded in finding its target audience, but a disappointing box office pull, heavily influenced by its woeful critical reception, means that the cost was any hope of a sequel.